Hello and welcome to the CYF course. We continue on the topic of discipline and boundaries, and we've established last time that it is important before we exercise discipline that we establish the foundation of unconditional love. And we have seen through the approaches of Dr. Campbell and Dr. Chapman that there are many ways that are important to convey this foundation of unconditional love to our children. Now we'll move more in learning how to show truth. We've seen how to show grace. Jesus is always grace first. Now we want to learn how to show truth. And we need not just to follow recipes, because every one of our children is very different. My first daughter, she was very stubborn. She was a born leader. And it was essential for us to confront her very early, because otherwise she would try to take the leadership of the home. I could watch TV, she was coming on me, taking the remote control, changing the channel and say, "Dad, I am the one who commands here." And it made me laugh in some ways, but in another way I said, okay, you are a leader, we recognize you are a leader. But every good leader needs first to learn how to obey. Otherwise, he will become a tyrant. So first, you will learn how to obey. We even had to spank her a few times. Spanking, I'll speak more about that in the last session. But spanking is not the recommendation I give to discipline your children. But I must admit that sometimes I didn't know how to do. I was just overwhelmed. I didn't know. All my ideas were ineffective. And I finished by spanking my child, and I explain you how I did it, but this is not what I recommend as a main discipline tool. It may be very destructive actually, especially if the parent is ventilating his anger in the discipline and justifying his discipline through Bible verse. We'll come to that. So Noemi, my oldest child, she needed some strong discipline. Baptiste, my second child, was much meeker, and I never had to touch him. If I was just raising my voice a little bit or frowning my eyebrows, he started to cry. He had a soft and tender heart, so discipline had to be different, respecting his personality. And then we had Christopher, and Christopher, again, he was an adopted boy. And if we disciplined him, he felt we didn't love anymore. So it was very challenging, because he was in a season of life where we needed to establish this unconditional love, this spirit of adoption in his life. And in the same time, we had to discipline him sometimes. But whenever we disciplined, everything was shaken for him. He started to fall even sometimes in depression, because he felt we didn't love him anymore. So my wife, she prayed and she asked the Lord, how should I proceed with him? And the Lord told her, you need to affirm him every time you discipline him, in parallel. So Joel, whenever she disciplined him, sometimes it was me also, we said, Christopher, we love you. You are so important. And what we are doing now doesn't change our love for you. It's actually because we love you that we do not accept everything. And after, we disciplined him. And we did that for 2 or 3 years. Until one point, when my wife wanted to discipline him, and he said, I know, you love me. So we saw, now the truth about the love, the aspect of this unconditional love has been internalized in his heart. So all of our children are different. Don't just follow recipes. It's good to have principles about upbringing for our children. But before I have 5 principles and no children. Now I have 5 children and no more principles, I could say. Because the more we go into practice, the more we realize our dependency on the Holy Spirit and God's wisdom. And the more we realize that we don't know everything. So we need God. And actually, when the Apostle Paul is exhorting us, walk by the Spirit, live by the Spirit. This is not just to have nice Christian meetings. It's for everyday life. And as parents, we desperately need to be led by the Holy Spirit. So our relationship with God is foundational to what we'll pass on to our children. So, let's go to some principles anyway. In the discipline and boundary settings, there are 3 different stages. The first one is identify the rules you want to have in your home. So it's the aspect of reflection. Stop and speak together as parents. You can even involve some of our older children in the process. What are our values? What kind of atmosphere or family dynamic do we want? What do we tolerate and what we don't want to tolerate? And from that, you can extract a few rules that you want to work on so it will be internalized by everyone in the family. Then teach and explain them. This is the instruction. And this is so important. Sometimes we have rules. We ask our children to follow them, but they don't know why. What is the relevancy of all these rules? And this is so important that we give an explanation if we can. Sometimes it's just because we've decided and we are the parents and we decided it's like that. But it's always good to question the rules and why we put these rules. And the third step is training the children to follow them. And this is the application. And it's a training. It's a process. They will not follow the rules from the first time because the rules are external and they need to learn to make them part of their life. And it takes time. So in that, we need sometimes to bring correction. And correction, it is when we see the children are going astray or they are not going in what we decided together. So we bring them in the right direction. It's correction. We correct. It's not about physical or harsh or anything else. It's really bringing them back in the heart of our values, in the right direction. So let's start with identifying the rules. Why should we have rules? Can we live without rules? It seems legalistic when we speak about rules, and I don't want to live in a family with so many rules, But, as soon as we live in society, and family is a society, we need to have rules. Why? Because rules protect people. They restrain people. Because we are all fallen creatures, sinners, proud and selfish. And we tend to go our way, to do things that will harm, even if it's not voluntary. We may hurt the other people. So the rules, they help us define a framework in which we decide to live together. It's like a family constitution, if you want. It's like the law of the family. And this is not negative. This is important. And if we do not identify the rules, the problem is we have rules anyway. And suddenly you start to get upset, you start to punish your children because they did something you do not want, you do not like, and they are surprised because you never said that. That's never been discussed. So you have rules anyway. But they are untold, they are like secret, they are something like shady, and we need to work on them and to make them explicit and to choose them intentionally. So we work in our upbringing, in our children's upbringing, with resolution and with intentionality. So don't come first with a list of 20 rules. Start with 2 or 3. You can write them on the fridge on a paper and you work on that maybe for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, until your children are practicing the rules naturally. They've been internalizing the rules and now it's part of themselves. It's part of their functioning, the way they walk in life every day. And this is so important. And then you can put other rules instead and work on other aspects. So, one thing important is that you choose the rule together as a couple. You cannot have rules for mom that do not work with dad. Otherwise, the child, he knows to whom he should go when he has trouble with one of the parents. Oh, but dad, he allows me to. Oh. So it's a recipe to have conflicts in your marriage. So take time before you include the kids, before you express a rule. Take time to discuss together as a couple and to decide what is important for both of you. And if one of the rules is not as important for the other one in the marriage, Make sure you stay loyal to one another and you don't despise the rule in front of your children when the other parent is not here. Otherwise, here it will bring conflicts and tensions between you. You may involve your older children if they want. And sometimes when you involve teenagers in defining the family values and the rules we want to have, they are sometimes very discerning, and what they say is very interesting, and it helps them also to understand why we do things when they are part of it. They can own the process. They are not just the victims of it because the parents have decided and we have to live with that. They are part of the process of decision and discussion. You need also to think about the possible consequences, and we'll speak about that in the next session. But a rule without a consequence has no value. For instance, sometimes I have trouble to keep the speed limit when I'm driving. But you know, what is helping me to think about it? It's because there is a consequence. If I get a ticket, I have to pay a fine. Ooh, this is painful. And because of that, because there is a consequence, I will remember the rule. And this is because of my human nature. I confess I have trouble to integrate this aspect in my car driving because I'm very much distracted and I pray, I think about a lot of stuff when I drive. So sometimes my speed exceeds what is allowed. And I need the consequence to remind me about this aspect of keeping the rules. Then pick up your fights. Don't start to be rule focused. And you start to be observing and watching your children, and every time there is one going too far in one direction or doing something that is not appropriate, you jump on it and you say something and you give a consequence. Please bring some humor in your family. I remember one of our rules at one time was you don't play with the food. And one of our kids, during one of the dinner at home, he put some food, I think it was mashed potatoes or something like that, in his little spoon, and he hit the little spoon and the food was ejected and it sticks on the ceiling. And everybody started to laugh, then stopped and looked at us. And I started to laugh too. And I said, okay, that was funny this time, but I don't want you to play with the food. So sometimes just laugh. But you know, if you do it regularly and you laugh most of the time and there is no consequence and you are not coherent with what you have decided, your rules will have no value anymore. So yeah, choose your battles, pick up your fights. Don't be always rule focused, but be coherent and make sure that you are not always downplaying the consequences. And every time your kid goes too far in his behavior, he knows he has no consequence because you are not coherent with yourself and what you decided. When you do that, you can educate, you can bring up your children by design and not by default anymore. What do I mean by that? By default is, oh, your child is coming home, waiting for dad to be home, and dad comes from work and he had good news and his salary will increase and his boss congratulates him, so he's very well and very happy, and the kid is misbehaving a lot and doing a lot of crazy stuff, but dad is laughing and everything is fine. Next day at work, dad hears that, oh, actually we did a mistake, your salary will not increase, it will decrease, and we are not so happy about you. It was, we are sorry, we read the report for the guy in the next office, but for you we are not so happy. So he came home very upset and defeated and irritated, and his little boy is doing exactly the same behavior than the last day, and now this time, pow, that hits him. Why? One day it's okay, the other day is not okay. My behavior or what is allowed at home depends on the mood or the emotional state of the parent. This is what I call bringing our children up by default. When we decide what are the rules, whatever our state. Of course, we stay human. But when we define the rules, we can go with what we have decided and not just be led by our emotions or our circumstances. And one day it's okay, the next day is not okay. We can have a line and we keep the line. Then there is the instruction and training part. You need to explain the rule and why you think about it. Why this is important. By doing that, you express the values of your family, what you want to give as a value. And this is so important that your children, they learn what are your values. And they don't just obey you because you are the parent and this is the Bible tells so. But there is an explanation they can process. You are helping them to understand. And then you teach and pray with them because it's not easy and they need the help of the Lord and the Holy Spirit to help them obey what we decide together. This is what we want to become. This is not so easy. And our children, they also need the help of the Lord. I remember one day, one of our children, he was crying because he said, I can't help. I'm always lying, but I can't help. I need you to pray for me because it's so difficult not to tell lies. We congratulated him because it was so important that he recognized that he cannot change himself. He needs the help of the Lord. So we prayed with him. And every time we prayed with him that the Holy Spirit would help him to become a man of truth. And now he is a man of truth. When you give a task to a child or a responsibility, I encourage you to explain the child how you expect it to be applied. Sometimes we ask the kid to clean the kitchen and he's doing it his way, with his criteria. And mom comes later and she sees the room and say, why didn't you sweep the room? Oh, but I did. But actually you don't have the same expectations or the same criteria. So it's important, if you want the child to do it the way you want it to be done, that you show the example. First you do, and he does with you, or he observes, then he does with you, then he does and you do with him. That is the whole process of discipleship. And you can do that for every responsibility that you give your children. But it's important to have briefings before a task or responsibility you entrust your child with. You explain how you want things to be done, what you want to see at the end. And when it's done, you go and you have a debriefing and you talk together. How was it for you? What did you do well? What was not so well? And you can bring correction or encouragement in these aspects. What is important, be the first to respect the rule. We teach by example, not through do what I say, but not what I do. If one of your rules is do not put your feet on the table, and as soon as dad is coming home from work, he sits in the sofa and put his feet on the table. No, it's not rules for the children, it's rules for everyone. And as parents, you need to teach by example. Be the first to follow your rules. And finally, the third step is correction. Correction is not punishment. It means straighten up what was bent or twisted. That means intervening and showing how to do it right. Corrections needs to come after instruction. If there is not the basic instruction, you do not correct. What you call correction may be instruction or punishment, but first you give the instruction, and after, if it's not really understood, you correct it to bring it back in line with what you want. For many things, actually, you don't need to punish. There is a lot happening through the relationship. So when you have this foundation of unconditional love, discipline is easier. When discipline or truth is the foundation, then it can be very harsh. And we need to be careful with that. And, if there is a disobedience, you need to find what is the motivation, because you will not treat every disobedience the same way. Sometimes it's a distraction. You've shared an instruction, you ask the child, okay? And he said yes, because he's wired to say yes when you ask a question, but he had not listened because he was thinking about his friend, or the movie he will see tonight, or he was thinking about the food, or he was thinking about let's have this time finish as soon as possible. So it's important that you ask the child to repeat when you give an instruction, so you see if he really listened and he has really understood. So ask him to repeat. Maybe sometimes it's laziness. And laziness is a sin. If you look in Proverbs, we don't want to encourage this sin. So we need to discipline here. Maybe sometimes it's open rebellion. And rebellion we don't want to tolerate. The sin of rebellion is like witchcraft, we read in 1 Samuel. So it's important that we uproot rebellion from our family. And this is where we need a real discipline here. And sometimes there is misunderstanding. The child, he heard the words, but somewhere he understood them in a different way than what you meant. And this is so important when he repeats, to make sure that he repeats not just the words, but the intention behind the words. Sometimes there are unmet needs, because your child is suffering, or he needs your attention, or he needs to share about something that is difficult for him. So you tell him something, but his heart is so filled with these difficult situations, he needs to talk about that. He is not able to handle the instructions or the information you give him. So what he needs now is some specific time with you, with your spouse, to make sure that he can unload what is on his heart, receive prayer, be encouraged. So we need to be discerning what is behind the disobedience. A few basic principles. Authority starts in my own life with self-government. I cannot ask of my children what I don't do myself. This is what we call integrity. I've shared about that before. Then authority is constant, not depending on my feeling or my mood. If not consistent, the child wins. Regularity. We need to be regular. We need to make sure that we teach the law of sowing and reaping to our children. When I jump from the window, I will fall every time, not one time every 2 or 3 times. You understand? We teach them spiritual laws, and what they reap, they will sow. So it's important that there is regularity, consistency, and that we keep in line with what we have decided as rules and as consequences. Then you don't need to shout. In some families, shouting is an expression of the upset heart of the parents, of course, and we are all human. Sometimes we'll shout, and it's not so serious. The child learns that when the parent, when he's doing something, it has a consequence on other people around him. It's not just neutral, you know. So, but remember that you don't need to shout. Shouting can be very threatening for a child, and authority does not come with the volume of your voice. And we need not to mix authority and authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is making people afraid, shouting a lot, but you have actually no authority. And sometimes people, they just whisper and they have such an authority. I remember one of my boys misbehaving. I went to him, put my hand on his head and looked at him, and I whispered, "Boy, I want you to stop that immediately." He stopped immediately, because the authority does not come with the level of your voice. And be careful with your words. When you are upset with a behavior of your child, think twice or 3 times before saying some words. When we are angry, do not sin. Do not let the sun come down on your anger. When we are angry, being angry is not a sin, but it may make us more vulnerable to sin. When I'm angry, I can say things or I can do things that I will regret later. But once again, we are humans. It can happen. And I'm not saying these kind of things to put guilt on any of us. When we sin, what is the way that the Lord is teaching us? Go back to your child and ask for forgiveness. And say, your behavior made me angry before, and I did that or I said that. And I want to apologize, because this is not what I think. This is not what I would have done. this is not reflecting who God is. I should have reacted like that. I love you. I'm still not happy with this behavior and I want it to change. So this is important that we are careful with our words. Now, let's put a few questions to finish this session, and you can go in groups of 2 or 3 and share about it, pray together, and try to help one another to grow in this understanding of the process of discipline in our families. We all need to learn that because we all come from dysfunctional families in one way or another, and we need the Father to learn how to discipline because we want to reflect who He is. So discipline is important. Discipline is vital. It's a way to express love, but not in any manner. There is a way to express who the Father is. So be blessed and let the Lord continue to share His values and heart with you.